Okay, welcome to the third edition to our mental health live discussion series with the Burnt Chef project. I'm Cara Houchen, I'm the editor of the Staff Canteen, and each week I'll be discussing mental health in hospitality with Kris Hall, founder of the Burnt Chef project, and a special guest. If you have missed any of the videos that we have done so far, you can find them on our Facebook page in the video section if you want to catch up. Joining Kris and myself today is Andy Lennox. Andy, tell us a bit about yourself and why you want to take part in this series, and what topics you particularly want to address.
My name is Andy Lennox. So basically, I've been in hospitality for nearly 15, 20 years. I've done various brands and worked from anything to potato peeler and KP when I was 13, 14, all the way through to being CEO of 350, nearly 400 employees. So kind of been in all of the different areas of hospitality. And I think, me and Kris have known each other for quite a while. And when he just started to go down the route of Burnt Chef and trying to think about how can we actually highlight the issue of mental health in hospitality, which I just think is a completely unspoken term, basically. I was really supportive of that, and that's what I wanted to get kind of involved about. And I just feel that right now the Burnt Chef is making all the right noises and doing all the right things, and potentially needs to take that next leap into kind of becoming a bigger, more structured organization, and actually potentially being given a bit more support from some of the bigger organizations out there, because actually, whilst mental health has very, very different guises and different forms, actually, I think in hospitality, it's a really difficult thing to get right. And I think the Burnt Chef does do that. But I think it's just basically, Kris is going at a million miles an hour, and I think it's that next step now. And I think that's what these kind of staff canteens are all about. And, in these kind of talks and trying to basically grow awareness of the fact that actually there really isn't that much help in the hospitality industry for mental health issues.
Yeah, and I mean, we've had, Kris, we've had very different people on, haven't we, so far? So it's really interesting to hear different perspectives. And actually, before we go into this, just to let anyone know who's watching, if you do want to ask any questions, please just comment, and we will ask those as and when we can. So, Andy, I asked you before kind of what you wanted to talk about, and I thought it was interesting that you wanted to focus on the awareness of kind of senior roles and how they're not allowed to suffer from mental health with kind of what you put. So maybe we could explore that a bit more.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of those things where, I mean, as a CEO or an MD, or if you're in a higher tier position in hospitality, you're actually from the very start, really, you're actually thrust upon to deal with mental health issues, which actually you potentially have no training to deal with. And I think trying to identify those issues and then trying to deal with them actually puts another added strain on your senior management team. And I remember there was one of the things I went to with Kris, and one of the ladies said, well, most mental health issues are in the we're in the ranks, we're in the trenches. Senior management don't suffer from mental health, and senior management don't have to deal with those issues. I mean, I necessarily don't suffer from mental health issues, but I have to deal with them on a daily basis, and actually that's really quite tiring and quite, it actually is quite draining, especially as you don't have that training. You're ending up basically, you've got one member of staff who's become an alcoholic, and you don't want to just get rid of him. He's a good member of staff, but you want to basically figure out how you can help him. Or you've got somebody who's is doing too much drugs, and you're trying to figure out how to help him. Or you've got someone who's homeless, or you've got people not turning up for work, and they're not turning up for work, but actually they're really good employees, but they're not turning up to work because they can't get themselves out of bed because they've got a mental health issue. So you're ending up dealing with a lot of issues, and I think sometimes it's kind of like, well, the senior management will deal with it, and the senior management will basically get on and essentially basically solve everyone's problems. And sometimes I think senior management don't really get a lot of respect for actually what they have to go through as well to deal with those problems. It's not necessarily mental health issues for senior management, but it's mentally draining for us. And also, let's be honest, there is probably also a lot more mental health in the senior management issues, but that's never spoken about. So
Okay.
that's kind of where I think it needs to be highlighted as well.
Yeah, and Kris, when we obviously saw that this is what we were going to be talking about, what's your take on that? Because we've talked a lot about helping employees, but we haven't really talked about employers, have we? So as in their mental health.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a lot of pressure, and it's actually so one of the diplomas I'm doing at the moment is in stress reduction and becoming a workplace trainer, and how to teach people, teach certainly management teams how to reduce stress within the workplace. And one of the things that's taught me is that actually it's the middle management that tend to find that they're under the cosh more so than anyone else, because in middle management you're getting it from the bottom and you're also getting it from the top, and you're stuck in this middle, and it can take away your sense of freedom, take away your sense of choice in some situations as well. And yet there's this big expectation from both sides to know exactly what you're doing and to make the right call at the right times. And that's one of the biggest things that we hear constantly is like, you know, do you want us to come into your business and do mental health awareness training? And they're like, yeah, well, we could learn a little bit more about it. But what we really want to know is if someone's suffering from mental illness, what do we do? Where does our role and responsibilities as an employer start? And where does it as a human being end, and vice versa? And how do we navigate that tricky, both legalities of it and also the complexities of human nature?
And Andy, you said obviously all of the different things that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, which your own problems aside, is just other people that you're helping out. Let's go back a little bit. So, what did you know about mental health when you were growing up? Were you aware of all of these different kind of avenues of mental health when you were younger, or is this something that's happened as you've kind of climbed the ladder and now you're having to look after everybody else?
Ironically, actually, I know quite well. I know quite a lot about it. My mum's a psychologist.
Okay.
Actually, you know, I've got family members who have had mental health problems, etc. So, actually, from my point of view, it's something that I've always known. I didn't think it was as bad as it is in the hospitality industry. Definitely not, and I don't think that was really highlighted to me until actually Kris and the Burnt Chef project. And this is why it's so important, right, to get the Burnt Chef project even more into the fore and even more into this kind of, you know, a national, you know, project, because actually I'm actually quite well informed on mental health, and I wouldn't have basically have said that it was as bad as it actually is. And I think that's why it's so important to get the Burnt Chef project kind of, and I think it's, you know, going back to what Kris was just saying quickly as well, is that, you know, there is the middle management that basically, you know, they do suffer, and they're actually, at the end of the day, middle management suffer the worst, 100%. They are getting it, as Kris says, from the employees and from the employers, and you know, it is incredibly hard because they can see both sides, and so I think that, but also you go up the ranks to the senior management, and you know, a hell of a lot of what we do from a mental health perspective, for helping our staff, is there isn't a line, you know, it's so far into the human rather than, you know, whether we should do it or not. You know, you don't have to go and do a lot of the stuff that we go and do and try and help people with. You know, finding someone a flat to live in because they've recently become homeless, or you know, helping, you know, get that guy in contact with somebody who can help him with his drug issues. You know, as an employer, you know, we don't have to do that. That's, you know, so you're in that human stage already straight away, I think, and that's quite important. So yeah, I mean, yeah, for me, mental health, I've always known about it. You know, it's always been around. I definitely didn't think it was as bad as it is in our industry, and I think there's so much more work to do, and it's very difficult because the Burnt Chef project basically wants to train and inform and try and basically, you know, highlight mental health in the industry as much as possible, but no one's got all the answers yet. And actually, how do you solve a lot of those problems? You know, hospitality is, you know, we used to have a quote, and you know, it's a rich tapestry of characters. You know, there are so many weird and wonderful people in hospitality. You know, and let's be honest, if you're in hospitality, you know, you're weird and wonderful, and you probably have got a problem, because actually it's a really tough industry to be in, but we also love it. it's a really fine balance to try and find, and I think, you know, the madness comes from hospitality as well itself. So, you know, it's a really difficult thing to try and solve. But I think, you know, basically be a good employer, and you can you know, bring in that kind of those safeguards, and just try and make work as fun and as enjoyable and as stress-free as possible. Then, you know, you're on your right track.
Yeah, Kris, I don't know if there's any points you want to pick up on there.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like, hospitality is bloody hard, and it's a fantastic industry, and I think you have to work really hard. I mean, Andy, you'll probably know from your own experience, you can't necessarily be mollycoddled and given time off every other day, if you want to get to the top, and if you want to own your own restaurant, or you want to be part of, you know, something much larger. So it is a fine line, and unfortunately there's no one size fits all. So, you know, what I've seen is you can walk into one business and they'll say, right, this is the issue that we're really struggling with, and walk into another business who has the same issue, but then the outcomes, the cultures, the staffing levels, just there's so many different variables that there's no one size fits all solution for it, and that's where the difficulty is with it. And that's why I don't think it's ever really been tackled in the way that we're trying to tackle it now, really.
And I just wanted to pick up with as well that Andy said that he didn't realise it was as bad as it was. Is that something that you come across quite a lot, Kris?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm over dramatising it, but I think, you know, when you look at the levels of stress and long-term stress within hospitality, it's higher than other industries. It's a matter of fact. You know, it's the antisocial hours, it's the long hours, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I think that's what makes this industry great and very unique. But I think we as an industry need to recognise that the stress levels in this particular trade are a lot higher than other trades. You know, whether you're a bus driver, or whether you're you know, a PA, or genuinely speaking, the stress levels in those jobs perhaps aren't as high as they are within hospitality. And that's where we need to band together, and, you know, we want to try and lead the charge and say, okay, it is stressful. Yes, there's an increased risk of mental illness as a result of long-term stress, including things like burnout and anxiety and depression. And how do we go about mitigating that? You know, again, we started the project with a view that we should put everyone on, you know, 4-day working weeks and 3 days off, and that would fix everything. But then it doesn't, because all those smaller businesses suddenly are then having to afford an extra 30, 40K a year, or possibly even more than that, to hire additional staff, and that's where their profit's gone. So there isn't, again, it's a really frustrating thing to say, because I don't have all the answers, but I think each individual case, there is a way of mitigating the stress within that workplace to improve the lives and welfare of your staff, and ultimately give you better retention long term.
So there's not a one-fit-all kind of solution?
I'd love to say yes, and I'd love to be the guy that brings it into the trade, because you know, not only will you make millions of people's lives significantly better and businesses more profitable, but, you know, I might be able to earn a living from it as well. But that's not the case, and that's the reason why, you know, it is like it is, and that's why great organisations like Mind and Samaritans and, you know, all these other charities exist, is because it is a problem. It's an epidemic, and I think we need to sort of, as I say, as an industry, just wise up to the fact that it is stressful, it is hard. You know, we certainly don't want to get around to the fact that everyone needs to do 20 hours a week, and that's how this industry will run, because it's unsustainable. But I just think we need to look at making minor tweaks and adjustments here and there on individual cases to make it better.
Yeah. Okay. And Andy, we talked about this before we started the live, but I wanted to talk to you about your own kind of mental health experiences, and you said that you don't suffer from mental health problems, but so you have a different kind of perspective on it, but you understand the problems that people are dealing with. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think genuinely, I think if you take, for example, like lockdown, second lockdown. So first lockdown, basically, I dealt with that loss of the business, and I created the Wonky table. Didn't mean to do it, but obviously that was me dealing with, you know, the issues of basically how do you deal with your business, you know, not being there anymore. And so I ended up creating the Wonky table, which then basically ended up, you know, growing and growing and growing, is now quite, you know, a big organization down in BCP, and, you know, we lobby government and all this kind of stuff. Second lockdown, I think, hit me a lot harder, So I think second lockdown, I needed to take a couple of days out and just kind of, just go for some walks and actually just reset a little bit. And I think I potentially basically, I don't feel that I suffer from mental health issues, but then I think potentially maybe I just deal with them in a way that, I go through the motions and then I'm fine again. So I don't know how necessarily basically you would say that was a mental health issue, but I think it's really important that you do take your time. And actually one of the things that basically was found through lockdown is we actually had the Wonky table, and we had the Wonky table round table, and you got some great guys on there who have been doing some really, really cool stuff around mental health and and doing Dorset Mind, and actually I'm trying to pull them now towards helping the Burnt Chef as well and stuff like that. And they're doing steps and exercises and stuff like that, and just trying to basically one of the things that happened through lockdown is hospitality came together and everybody is supporting each other a lot more. I can't tell you how many times I check in on people, whether it's just a text saying how you doing or everything okay. Everybody, I check in on a lot of Wonky table people and just generally people, and I think a lot of people are starting to do that more now. So that's it is very, the awareness is there. It is there that basically mental health is a problem.
Yeah, and as an employer, can you tell us about maybe a situation that's been particularly difficult where you've had to help someone with mental health issues, like an example?
Yeah, I mean, very vaguely, or we can, you can kind of like go with it. But so, for example, we've had people with drug issues, and alcoholism, hiding that, and I mean, this will every single person in hospitality who is a business owner has experienced. Someone stealing from them, or someone drinking on the job, or somebody doing drugs too much. I don't think necessarily though that we realise that that's a mental health issue, rather than the guy's just on drugs. And I think there have been times where basically we've dealt with some issues where you're kind of like, right, you're out the door, and actually potentially should have actually dealt with it in a different way, which would have been actually, okay, cool, understood, you've got a problem, instead of dealing with it. And this is what we do now, instead of trying to it's right, you're out the door, it's okay, what's the problem, where's the issue? I mean, literally down to I mean, I had someone a couple of days ago who just basically was just all over the place, absolutely haphazard, just kind of getting really angry with people and getting shouting, and you're kind of like, my first reaction to anybody who basically starts giving staff or anybody problems is, right, I come down quite hard. But then now we take them outside and we sit them down and we say, right, come on in, what's the problem? And more often than not, they start crying, let's be honest. And then it comes out and they start telling you what the problems are, and then it's okay, well, let's try and fix these problems. So I think over the years, I can't really go into specifics, but you can say that basically there have been times where we have literally had to get people taken and actually kind of literally take them down to AA or some kind of organization, and actually literally sit them there and kind of say, look, unless you do this, you're gonna lose your job. And I think now the way that we've changed from basically going, if you've got a problem or you're stealing, why are you stealing? If you're an alcoholic, why are you an alcoholic? If you're taking drugs, why are you taking drugs? And I think necessarily, 5-10 years ago, I may not have been the same, say the same thing. It would have been, right, sorry, you're stealing, out you go. And then I'm coming after you for all the money that you've stolen from me. But I think now it's more, okay, let's kind of try and drag it back. And actually, we've also got loads of employees who do have long-standing mental health issues, who we know of those, and I know of those. And so we deal with them in a certain way. And there are certain things that we tweak to basically make sure that happens in a nice way. And then there's a lot of people who would not tell me that they have a mental health issue. So it will be until when I find out that they have one, or whichever. So, but I think it's also, not everything is a mental health issue. Some people just steal, and some people are just alcoholics, and you can't sort that out. But I think a lot of it all stems from some like one small problem, and then once you've got that problem sorted, it actually does start to tick back the other way. I mean, we have changed working patterns. Kris touched on a 4-day working week, and actually one of my managers wanted to do a 4-day working week. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. See if that works, knowing that it won't work, because actually you end up to get your hours up to a certain time to be able to survive and live. You still want to do 45 hours or whatever, 40 hours, or even if you're doing 35, you end up doing 4 AFDs, and that just kills you. And then you're burnt out the next day, so you don't do anything, you do absolutely nothing, and then you have one day off, and then you're back at it again. So it's actually better to structure work patterns so that if you can get 2 clear days off, then great. But also just a bit of less evenings and a bit more daytime. But also, it's very difficult to structure hospitality in a way that works for everybody. But it is starting to happen more. And I think basically if people can realise that it's, most people in our industry will have Sundays and Mondays off, or Mondays and Tuesdays off. You just not the weekend. You just don't have a weekend. It's just a different kind of life, I suppose. But
I think it's an interesting point that you raise, and the fact that I think that your business is quite, I would say like you're leading the charge with regards to how you handle things, and rather than being sort of like a zero tolerance on everything, you've sort of gone back the other way and started to investigate to see if there's a chance of keeping that good member of staff and ensuring that you're not having to go through that re-employment process and setting other people up. But I guess the big question for everyone is like, where does that period end, and where, if someone is stealing from you, for example, like how do you commit to trying to improve them without damaging the financials of the business at the same time? And that's the difficulty that I'm finding from a lot of business owners at this moment in time.
Yeah, and sometimes you just can't help. I remember I had one person, basically, this has got years and years ago, just employed this new guy, brilliant, CV was just, top notch. And I was getting him for an accident.
Oh,
I think we just lost him.
We've lost him. Whilst we're waiting for him to come back. We've gone robot.
Therein lies my first. And I remember he did sterling work. We lost me.
You're back now.
You're back now. You are back now. Yeah, we lost you just as you were going into that story.
I'm not quite sure what happened there. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Where did I get to?
I think it was just about to start to tell the story.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This has got to be 6 years ago, and we just employed this new member of staff. Absolutely brilliant. CV was just cracking. Getting him from an absolute steal for like his caliber of CV, and therein lied my first mistake. Because actually, I should have realised then that basically I was getting him for a steal. And I remember he did amazing work for about 3 or 4 months. Didn't drink. And then we went out for a pint, and not he hadn't told us he didn't drink. He just hadn't really had a pint. Went out for a pint, and we never saw him again. And he actually went off on one. And I remember basically speaking to him a couple of months later, but and he apologised for disappearing and stuff like that. And some people you just can't help, but. And actually we kind of, we found a way through, and he explained what that all was about and everything like that. And essentially, basically, he had severe mental health issues. So I think you can't help everybody, but if you can change your business plan just to tweak certain areas and just be a little bit more, your managers, like if something happens, like a drug issue or an alcohol issue or, something that's out of the ordinary, it's not necessarily that person becomes that bad employee. It's just maybe that basically they're struggling with stuff at home or whichever, and they need some help.
Yeah, it's very quickly. I think anyone that has suffered, and the term mental health, I think we have to be quite careful because we use terms like anxiety, and we all have anxiety. It's innate within all of us. It helps keep us fighting fit. It helps build our resilience. And I think where it becomes an issue is when it starts to impact your day-to-day work, etc. But I think it's small tweaks that business owners need to sort of consider, things that they may not have even considered before, like having 11 hours between shifts. Something quite simple, rather than being on a finish and then starting off on breakfast in the morning. Those sort of things are just going to increase
Really
stress
important.
levels.
Really important. We do that. It's really important to make sure that you're trying not to come in the next day. And just quickly, because you're talking about it now, Cara, this is the difference basically. So I don't, yes, sometimes I suffer from anxiety. For example, second lockdown, yeah, pretty anxiety. Quite a lot of anxiety going on. But it's not a mental health issue. It is, as Kris says, it's when that anxiety is there constantly. And for me, basically, second lockdown needed to take some time, but it wasn't a mental health issue. So I think you do need to have that clear definition between, if someone comes up to me and goes, "Oh, I'm feeling a bit anxious today. I think I've got mental health issues," I'm going to turn around to them and say, "Go back to work." But if that's on a third or fourth day, then I'm going to be like, "Okay, look, we need to talk about this." I think it is a clear line. Otherwise, basically, you go to the start, you go down the other route to the kind of like snowflake generation, where basically you're sitting there kind of going, everything's a problem and everything's an issue, and I can't pick up a spoon because it might, hurt my feelings. And I think that's really important to have that clear definition between what is mental health and what is not mental health.
Yeah. Kris, got a question for you. Do you believe that the pressure and expectation to work overtime or unpaid to make sure the kitchen's ready for the next day is a massive factor for mental health in the hospitality industry?
I think that if it's one-off, or if it's something that you're doing as an employee, as one-off, or once in a blue moon, then I think there's certain. I mean, certainly in my contracts I've always had, there's a clause that states that you have to be there, available to do additional workload if it's needed. But I think where it becomes an issue and where it does start to impact people's mental health is when it's becoming expected. So when you're doing 7 days on, and you've missed your 2 days off, and no one addresses it with you, no one says to you, like, is it okay? Thanks ever so much. This just becomes expected. And that's where you start to see the shift happen with regards to someone who, initially might see that as a challenge and might see that as a good opportunity to prove themselves. But if that's something that's happening regularly, all of a sudden you're stripping that control away from that individual, and that will increase the likelihood of you suffering from long-term mental health issues. And again, that comes down to I think the business owners and the management staff, whether it's down to training or whether it's actually, looking at the company that you're working for. I think our role is to explain to managers and business owners, actually, do you know what, that is going to have a detrimental impact, and long term you're going to lose that good member of staff if that continues. And it's about educating them about the impacts of that. And I think individuals also need to also look at it. And I know it's difficult. It's a really, really tough one to call, because everyone needs to earn money and they're financially dependent upon that job. But I think you also need to bear in mind that hospitality is wide and vast. And I think that if you do feel that you're in a position where you're constantly being taken advantage of and you're not getting paid for work, and you're doing 16 hours a day with back-to-backs on a regular basis, then it's probably time to look after yourself and try and work out what you need to do in order for long-term sustainability.
Yeah, and I just wanted to go back to something Andy said about how sometimes people don't want to tell you that they've got problems outside of work or in work, or whatever it might be. So I just wondered, from both of your points of view, is there any tips from a management level on how to kind of get that out of people when you know there's something wrong, but you just can't get them to say it? Is there any examples that you can help people with?
I'll just jump in quickly if that's all right, Andy. I think it comes down to culture, first and foremost. I think that if you have a culture that's open within the workplace, it's easier for people to discuss mental illness, and to open up. And I think it's also about the skill set of the managers as well. So, firstly asking people if they're okay. I think, Andy, you've got the right sort of method, and I know that Adam Simmons, who we were speaking to last week, his method's quite good. He says, tell me to fuck off, but is there something you want to talk about? Which is a really nice thing within hospitality, because it's language that people understand, and it basically says, like, you're free to leave this conversation anytime you want, but here's an olive branch. Is there anything that you'd like to talk about? Like, what's going on? And then, stigma is so strong within hospitality and mental health. Someone may never be able to come out and talk to you. But I think that by developing a culture where managers are, they can actively listen, they can use the right language and open questioning, and they can ask the right questions in the right times, in the right environments, I think it'll make it easier for those individuals to speak.
Okay. Andy, any tips?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of broadly agree with what Kris is saying. I suppose my way of dealing with trying to get someone to tell me whether they're okay or not is I don't stop until they tell me, and I think that's it's I know it's very difficult, isn't it? Because actually you can do the kind of softly, are you okay? And let's be honest, 95%, 99% of people are going to say yeah. And actually, if someone's suffering from the way they say, yeah, I'm fine, and potentially the wrong way, but my way will be then, okay, right, cool, I'm just going to keep on asking you until you tell me. And more often than not, the ones that are really bad, you then find out, and that's kind of by being doggedness about it, and actually just keep on going and saying, look, come on, tell me, come on, come outside, come on, come and have a cigarette, let's talk this through. And I know it's not probably the best way for someone who's got mental health, but once you know the issue, you can deal with it. And I think that's really, really important. So yeah, I do broadly agree with, because I think basically there needs to be a lot more, and we need to break down the stigma in the workplace. And I'm not entirely sure how that can be done in the sense of people talking about it, because people aren't going to talk about mental health as much as the burnt chef would like them to, unless you're kind of proper breaking down barriers. And I think that potentially is, sometimes a bit more forceful, but my way works sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. And then also what you don't want them to do is just clam up and go, actually, you know what, I don't want to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
And so it is very difficult. But generally speaking, especially with with senior management, middle management, when there's a problem, and if there's an issue, you're pretty much going to get it out of them, because actually, when there's an issue, the team doesn't flow, and so you kind of need to stop that and break that cycle and find out what is wrong.
I was going to say, actually, the things you said there, do they apply to senior level as well, or do you have a different approach to people that are senior to not senior? Because obviously everyone's very different, but we
don't have mental health. No, okay. But it's kind of like that thing, isn't it? Right? It's, but from our point of view, we are going to sit there and we do our jobs. We've been through 2 lockdowns. I've built 2 restaurants in 2 lockdowns. I mean, stress levels. I'm just a sucker for punishment. But I think with senior management, for us, it's more about building probably more links with people like the burnt chef, and the burnt chef breaking down those barriers, and dealing with it on a kind of like away days or whatever you're going to call them. You don't want to call them mental health days, but I think for away days and basically doing stuff as a team, you will start to break that down. But quite frankly, going for a walk, going and dumping myself in the sea normally sorts me out. And I think if you're at that level, you're fine. I think if you just can't function, then that's where we need to get the burnt chef. And I suppose that the big thing for me is that at the moment you've got Dorset Mind, you've got Samaritans, you've got UK Mind or whatever it's called. I think the burnt chef is recognised in hospitality as being that kind of leading light, and I think it's now about trying to figure out how we can push funding for that burnt chef so that actually Kris can do more, and because actually it's all well and good if you've got 22 people you can train, but I've got 22 people that I could train in my own restaurants, You know, so it's actually, you know, it needs to go like this basically. And I think Kris is the right person to spearhead that, and I think he's got a great brand to be able to do that. And I think it's, you know, the way it's kind of started to snowball is brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, the key thing for us in the project is to raise enough capital to be able to actually spend my time traveling around the country and training these teams. And I think a good key thing from this conversation is more management training opportunities. So it's about recognizing mental illness, recognizing high levels of stress, both in yourself and in others, and how you go about engaging with that and where you stand in terms of HR policies as well. So that's something that we're designing now, which will be finished before the end of this year. We've got a short stint touring around colleges, teaching the students about their own mental health and how to sort of build their resilience going into the commercial workplace. But I think the key thing in terms of funding and building and providing a better benefit for the industry is to be able to put more people feet on ground, you know, that we can train up and that we can give people that knowledge base and go out across not just the UK. I mean, we're international. In America, Canada, Tokyo, South Africa, Australia now as well. So, you know, this is something that we need to build resources for that can easily travel further afield as well.
I normally finish, and I have asked everybody that we've done these with, Kris, is I normally say, you know, why is it so important to talk about mental health? I'd just like to go back to the first point that Andy made about how you know, those who are higher up, they don't suffer from mental health. So it's almost like a different talking point to the one that we've discussed in previous series.
Yeah, I mean, let's just for some clarification, because it's something that sort of sets me off. So everyone, let's just be clear, everyone in the world has mental health. Okay, so somewhere along the way in our history, physical health and mental health got separated, and they're no longer best friends. And you know, no one looks at people and go, oh, he's got physical health, Jesus. Well, mental health is something that we've all got. There are some people who have high resilience levels, who can cope with what life throws at them, and who may never go through life suffering from a bout of serious anxiety or depression or PTSD or you know, suicide. And you know, if anyone is watching this and feels like that currently, please, you know, reach out to us and we'll direct you with that. But there are also other people like myself, for example, who are susceptible to depression, to bouts of depression. And for me, it's about building emotional intelligence and understanding where my triggers are. So, for example, sat in an office for 2 weeks without speaking to anyone face to face, huge trigger for me. And so I need to work around ways of doing that. So I think to say that senior management teams don't suffer from, or are less likely to suffer from mental illness is perhaps factually, well, it is factually incorrect. But what I would say is perhaps those members of staff who are in senior management teams have a better level of control with regards to their workload, have a better level of resilience because of where they've been and what they've learned. Perhaps they have a better financial position as well, better level of security. And all of these things can impact your mental health and make it negative. So I would say that they're probably more susceptible than anyone else, but I think the toolkits that they've got and the positions that they're in make it perhaps less likely that someone within a senior position may exhibit signs of mental illness.
Okay. Andy, would you like to add anything else?
Well, I still think that my main point being is that, you know, that senior management do suffer from mental health. I think the main point being is actually we need to be given the tools more so to deal with our employees' mental health problems. Because actually we're not trained psychologists. And I think that, you know, a lot of pressure is put on employers to, you know, look after your employees, which is obviously what we want to do. And it's, you know, it's kind of like the shining beacon of where we try to be. But you know what, actually, this is what the burnt chef is doing. It's kind of going like, okay, but these guys need the tools to be able to do that. They need to understand and know how to do it. And this is the bit, right, is that the burnt chef is kind of, you know, Dorset Mind, you know, whatever, or Mind or whatever we're calling it, you know, might come in and say, oh, you know, mental health is really, really bad, and you know, this is how you can deal with it. You know, work without your laptop or whichever. It's like, you know, but we're in hospitality, we're on our feet. It's completely different. And so I think that's where burnt chef kind of was born. Really, was that actually hospitality is a completely different place to deal with mental health. And you know, I think we need to give ourselves more tools to be able to deal with our employees' mental health and recognise when there might be an issue. You know, a guy going out and getting pissed on his day off is not a mental health issue. But if he's coming to work and having a sneaky couple of beers, you know, and then every day is doing the same thing, and then doesn't turn up for work for 2 days, you know, you need to be able to recognise that potential, you know, there is a big issue there maybe, and actually maybe, you know, as Kris was saying, potentially even a suicidal issue, or he's actually, you know, you don't know where he's gone. And I think that's, you know, I go back to that story. We ended up finding this guy, but it took us 3 days to find this guy, and you know, we were really worried, and we ended up having to go and track him down to make sure that he was okay. So I think, yeah, the tools to deal with it, because actually that's what I think tips senior management into, you know, really stressful situations, is trying to deal with other people's stress, basically, and trying to fix other people's problems, which is what we're here for to a certain extent. But yeah, we need to have the tools to be able to do that, and that's what we've been working with Burnt Chef, to have the questionnaires which we can send out, which, by the way, I remember sending one out at lockdown. I think I got one respondent. You know, so it's not easy to engage with your staff to make sure that they fill in these things, unless you make it mandatory, and then you're telling people what to do, and that again defeats the object. And then I think, you know, you need to have these HR plans of, you know, what are the triggers, guys? What are the things that you need to look at? So I think, you know, the Burnt Chef's got the right tools. It just needs more support, I think, and financially to be able to keep on pushing those tools out.
Well, we are hoping that the more we talk, like we said, the better that this can all get, and the communication will open up, fingers crossed, more and more. So I'm going to finish on that point. Thank you to everyone for watching. Andy, thank you so much for raising some really important points, and Kris, thank you again for your knowledge on all of this, because it's great. And I sit here and I forget that actually I'm supposed to be doing an interview and I'm listening to everything that you're saying. So next Wednesday at 4:45 p.m, Kris and I will be back, and we'll be joined by an ex-chef, Pete Tofis, I don't know if I've said that right, who would, on a positive, like to discuss what a great industry hospitality can actually be, as well as contributing factors which lead to poor mental health and all the other things that we've discussed. I think that'll be a really interesting chat with him. So see you all then, and thank you both again.
Nicely done. Thank you.